waiting. Just waited for you to finish that tea. Thought I'd start it earlier on. How you doing, buddy? Episode 80. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas to you too.
We've had a little break, haven't we? We went to Duxford Air Museum with a fellow ASL player, and we've had a Christmas to get through. How was your Christmas?
I was ill for the first part of it, and then my mum was ill, so it's been a bit grim, really.
Right.
But and then just as we were all feeling better, my family the rest of my wider family turned up to kind of like ruin the day after we got better. So
right. Well,
it's been all right. It's been all right.
I had a Christmas Eve. I broke my tooth, my back tooth, and so I have a big hole where a tooth used to be, but I've still got the remnants of the root system or whatever it is jutting out and scraping the side of my cheek. So I can hardly eat. I can't really talk very well easily without it feeling like it's scraping. And I went to the dentist today to have a terrible experience, as everybody does at dentists. They were trying to be very nice, but they weren't able to do anything with it apart from refer me to a specialist. And they tried to put a cap, like the putty stuff, I suppose, and they just pushed it in. It hurt so much, and it didn't stick in. They tried 3 times, and then they went for the lesser evil, which was just to file the tooth down. So it's been a tricky morning.
There's something there to remind you of the crag rules, isn't it? I'm trying to...
Absolutely, yeah. It's pretty violent.
Difficult to drive a vehicle over that.
Exactly. So so that's what's going on there. We have not played very much. We're going to go through a game that we played a couple months ago from Hazmo, City of Steel. Back, not the scenario. We didn't do the scenario very much justice because it ended quite quickly. So it is what it is. These things happen. No reflection necessarily on the scenario itself. We're going to talk about the upcoming tournament for next year's eliminated rounds. We're going to talk about minefields, and Toby in particular will give us some tips about mines. We're going to talk about a new scenario pack, at least 1, if not 2, and if not 3, because there are 3 crazy unique ideas that we're going to talk about there. And we can talk about the Director's Pack, Enrico's Director's Pack, which I'm excited about. And obviously, we're going to talk about Journal 13.
Yeah.
Because we haven't talked about what was the final winner in our bracket competition.
Have we not talked about that?
I don't think we have. So, do you know the scores?
No. I can find out, though.
I think it's very important you do. I believe the Journal won. But... I mean, so it was Beyond Valor versus the Journals. It was a very close vote. The vote was 31 to 26 in favour of the Journals. So the Journals did win the best official ASL product.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
That's a fair comment, and I think I can kind of I'm absolutely happy with that, because I think I'm excited about Journal 13, and we've seen, we're talking about what was in Journal 13. We can run through a list of it. But I mean, have you got the list there? I don't know if you've got the list.
I have got the list here. If you want me to,
run through it.
33 scenarios.
Yeah, incredible.
Which I think is more than ever before. I don't seem to remember there being that many. I've no idea officially, but it's going to include ASL Board 77, much anticipated Board 77.
Yep.
And Overlay X20 plus. Campaign Game 1 from Hatton in Flames First Impressions article. Yep. So there's an article about hull down positions and how valuable they may actually be to your AFV by Phil Palmer. Advanced Nuggets 2 is Paul Sidhu and Ricky Spilkey looking at some obscure, easily overlooked rules, which would be very interesting. Radio Contact Essentials, a primer on the basics of this critical element of OBA.
Right.
Then we got Second Impressions. Ricky Spilkey against Ricky Spilkey features very, very highly in this journal. Talking about the OBA draw pile probabilities in an extension of the old Robert Meldrew article from the General.
Right.
and providing the basis for the pleather variant for OBA chip draws. So it looks like there might be a move toward a semi-official status for the pleather variant. So I'm only halfway through these articles, by the way, so don't go moving on to something else. An alternative OBA system. This is by Jim Bishop, exploring additional chip replacement methods in a follow-up to Rich's draw pile article. Ken Dunn gives us a preview of the drop zones in St. Mary Glees, and this is the historical ASL modules. There's a lot here about St. Mary Glees one way or another. I'm not sure what that's in preparation for, but obviously, St. Mary Glees. Forgotten War designers' notes should be interesting. There's some insights into the design process. A tale of two scenarios by John Zlotvinsky's analysis of the original and updated version of the Yanks scenario, the Mad Minute.
Right.
Then we have Pamare Pateram, Andrew Hershey's follow-up to the Ghost Killers from ASL Journal 12.
Right.
Covers the history of the 41st Independent Commando Royal Marines in the Korean War. And then there's a debriefing offers this. So, that's it.
Wow.
It's 33 scenarios. It's a lot of stuff there.
Isn't it? An awful lot in there. So, I mean, we're pretty much spoiled with that as a thing. Now, a higher price point than they've done before. I don't think it's going to put many people off for the journal. 33 scenarios for, I think it's about $50 as an introductory price, and maybe
it's $48 if you get it now, but I think that's not indefinite, is it? I'm not sure what point 60, that price goes up to 64. Yeah.
So,
but it'll be more than that in Europe, won't it? And
exactly. But that's $2 a scenario, and you've got extra. You got the map, and you've got the articles,
the reading. Yeah,
exactly. So, pretty good value, I think, all in told. So I'm very excited about that, and that's something I'm going to wait for, obviously, for the UK to get their copies of it. What are you most looking forward to, scenarios in there, or what do you?
Yeah, I think most looking forward to scenarios. Yeah. I think now because we're back into playing and stuff, and we haven't had a journal for a while. I'm kind of remembering the days when a journal came out, you'd kind of play them with you'd playing. So let's get something out of the journal, and they'd be great one after another. They'd be cracking scenarios.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to that, and we're very excited. And also, I'm more excited about the fact that the journal isn't like a dead idea as well. I know that there are various reasons why the journal takes a little while longer to come out, and there are pressures on other products as well that kind of compete with MMP's time. But it's always good to see that the journal is not being forgotten, and we.
Yes, I would have thought it would be like a pretty good earner for MMP, and as well as keeping the game kind of like fresh in people's minds, refreshing it for people. I'm surprised that it's that they've not been very regular in producing it in a way.
It's, I mean, what's the good news is, other companies may have taken, for example, 10 of those scenarios and said, okay, well, this is the journal for this year, and then maybe another 10 for next year, and another 10, and still have 3 left over. And what they've done, to their credit, is bundle those all into one journal, which is nice. So pleased to see that. That's
absolutely
pretty good. Okay, all right. So excited about that. The new pack, which we'd had a bit of a sneak preview of before, the tournament directors pack, and there are 16 scenarios in this one, 4 color scenarios. We'll go over them in next time's episode, because we're going to talk about one that we will have played by then. We're playing one which I can't remember what we're playing, Martin, but I think is it Liberating Bukovina?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
so that's the one we're going to play. Each of these scenarios features a specific bid to be able to pick the side, and that's, I've talked a little bit about this on the forums already, but basically you pick a side by looking at the victory conditions, and they will specify something in there, whether it's the turn of reinforcements, or the number of CVP that has to exit the board, or the number of buildings you have to capture, whatever it might be. And you're effectively bidding on one of those values, and the person with the more difficult task will win the side that they have bid for, is effectively how it works. So it means that you don't pick sides before you look at or before you set up, if you like, or before you figure out what's doing. You actually sit down and look at the scenario to start with, and then bid, and then obviously you've got the side that you bid for. So it does add an extra element of thought in the scenario. I played 2 of these already. I found that it gave me an extra kind of attachment to my side. Sometimes I kind of just think, well, okay, you might just pick the side, just go with it. It's easier to defend or attack. But actually, this was quite a bit of an investment in terms of, okay, I've now decided the Germans can't win if the Russians come on turn 4. Now I've got to prove it, kind of thing. That type of thing. So I'm quite excited about taking a look at those scenarios. Nice to see an innovative new thing in scenarios coming along, and that's always good. I mean, arguably it's a bit of an extension of the Australian balance system. I think is kind of how you could read that. Any thoughts on that, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, the only drawback from my perspective is that if you get that wrong at the beginning, your analysis is too skewed at the beginning, you could effectively have lost the scenario, right, before you put a counter on the board, kind of thing, because you just misbid so badly. Yeah. And I remember when I saw them at the tournament, that was something I kind of was a bit anxious about. I was like, right, do you know what? If I bid for this wrong, and I shied away, and I went for one that didn't have that kind of bidding system at the beginning. Right. But it's a very, very good system. And if you're not, yeah, I mean, it's a whole new layer to a scenario, isn't it?
Right. And this got us talking about because the reason that we played these scenarios is because they were unpublished.
Sorry.
So they were unpublished at the time, and so the idea was that no one has an inherent advantage because you haven't practiced. And this kind of brought up this question about, should tournaments put the scenarios up front and in advance, a week's notice, 2 months notice, no notice at all, turn up and play tested scenarios, for example, or you can play test scenarios as part of the tournament, and that's maybe it enhances the prize support from the publisher. Where are you on that kind of side of where tournaments and kind of ASL gathering should be done?
I think tournaments should be varied. They should like, at each tournament you go to should feel different. There should be a slightly different structure. Mm-hmm. Now, so to me, there are benefits and drawbacks to both of those systems. So so for example, the last tournament that we were at in Blackpool, Bounding Fire, nobody knew what the scenarios were before we arrived. In fact, they were revealed literally just as that sort of session began, and I heard people saying that they quite liked it because had they been sent them 3 months ago, they would have been playing them to death, doing all this preparation for a tournament, whereas actually they were just relaxed. They just got their stuff together and then turned up for the it's literally your skills against mine. It's not a question of how long you've had to prepare it and things like that. And I think that's a real benefit. That's fun. On the other hand, you still got to. I don't know. That was one of my view. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So
what did you think?
So I thought I was happy doing that. I'm a laid back competitor anyway. I don't mind necessarily. If we ask to do one thing, I think in preference, I have a preference that we play scenarios that have been play tested before. Not because I care about balance, because
I agree with that.
I like to feel like that I could have at least practiced. And the reason why I didn't win the tournament was because I didn't practice enough. I think that's a nicer feeling to me than knowing, okay, we're all and maybe because I've got more time than maybe most people. So there's an advantage there in that because I've got the time, I don't mind. But because it raised the next question about, well, in a tournament game, are you under any obligation to tell people you've played a scenario before? Now, in this one, obviously, where there's an expectation that these scenarios are all blind, then of course you should say, if you've play tested these scenarios, you should say. But in a way, the advantage of play testing a scenario that you're supposed to be playing blind far outweighs the balance, for example. And arguably what's worse with, for example, the fact that the ECZ tournament scenarios were in this tournament, you couldn't really give the balance because there's no balance to give. The balance is the bid, so that's the inherent value. So in theory, people probably would have shied away from the ECZ ones if you knew that your opponent had played that one. The next problem is that, and I have no question that everybody that I've ever played is very, very honest, but it just is an extra angle to sort of, if I went to some, I'm going to say foreign tournament because it's easier to say, I don't know, people from a different country that might, take the game more seriously, less seriously, I don't know. But why is it that I have to rely on someone telling me they've played a scenario? We even said in because you started talking about, well, if it's played scenarios in the past, if they tell you as well whether they've played it or not. And we had a bit of a discussion about, well, if you are going to be honest, let's assume that everyone's going to be honest and will even say, yeah, I've played the scenario. Arguably, you are punished a little bit if you've recorded your scenarios on, for example, the archive with some notes. And you might say, look, I think the French attacking on the left-hand side can't be beaten. And someone could look at those notes that are about to play you and say, okay, he knows that the French are going to attack on the left, whatever it is, this might be. And so you've got this extra layer of how much information do we share? And I definitely don't want to get down the line of private notes for the archive, where only you can see your own notes, or people deliberately put the wrong information on the archive to test. I don't think anyone takes it that seriously. But I can imagine, for example, and it, again, this is hypothetical to the nth degree, but when we set up our ASL World Championship and we, strive to figure out who is the ASL World Champion, wouldn't things like that happen? Like if you published let's say, for example, it's, it's I don't know, like a final and pick two great players. I don't know, Plaver and JR Tracy, Plaver and Toby, whatever, it doesn't matter. And these guys both know what the scenario is for the final. And let's say, for example, one of them had kept meticulous notes on the archive. You would go down and you would look at it's almost like their playbook, for an ASL, for an American football team. You're kind of in their mind.
I don't think I would do it in a tournament. I'd say, for example, if somebody sent me out the pack 6 months ahead and said, right, these are the tournament scenarios, I'd probably go onto Game Squad and have a look at the balance and see the sides, and I'd kind of go, good. If I thought, Toby's written up a little thing here, I'd probably read it. Okay. If I turn up to this tournament where they're blind, me and Toby meet, we get given our scenario pack and we go off, and he goes, I've done that one. I wouldn't go, right, I'm just going to pop off to the toilet and go on my phone and see if he's written anything on Game Squad. Do you know what I mean? Because that feels like cheating. Yeah. It doesn't feel like cheating a month before the tournament because that information is available to everybody.
Right.
I don't know I'm going to play Toby. That information is available to everybody. But I think when I get to the tournament, that's cheating. I think, well, I don't know if it's cheating or not, but I wouldn't do it. And I think a lot of people wouldn't. That feels... Toby's the sort of, doesn't put that information on Game Squad, I don't believe, does he? And I guess that'd be another element. If you were a very competitive person with the intention of winning tournaments, Toby's a very giving player in terms of his skill. It would make sense not to publish your actual approaches to a specific scenario that might come up in a tournament one day. That would make sense. But I think the likes of me and you, who are never going to win the tournament or unlikely to win the tournament, posting our notes, which are
detriment, is it?
Ambiguous, like use to somebody anyway, is absolutely fine. Right. I can't. Yeah, I'm not sure that we're like overthinking it really is I guess where I'm coming from.
No, I hear you. And I think as we experienced certainly in the last tournament we went to, it's less of a tournament, more of a gathering of friends these days, isn't it? That people are just turning up to have a chat, and there's some ASL going on in the side. That's kind of what's happening really.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right that it's not. We don't take it that seriously, but
some do.
Yeah, exactly. Some people, there is a competitive nature, and that's nothing wrong with that. That's there should be a friendly element and a competitive element. And we saw last time in the tournament we were at, two people dropped out because they were enjoying their game so much they didn't want to be rushed to play to the end, and decided, okay, well, they'll drop out. Now that has its own issues, but the point being that some people are so uncompetitive they would rather enjoy the game completely for what it is, and not to worry about the tournament itself, which is So that's that. Oh, okay, all right. So that brings us on to our scenario packs that we may be doing. Now we've got a new map. You want to tell us about the new map that's coming?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. Yeah, so Tom Repetti very, very generously offered to help us to produce a geomorphic map, and we wanted him to create a map inspired by, not a copy of. So it's not attempting to be historical at all, but it's inspired by the Norwegian town of Tretten, and famous in the ASL community because there's a scenario called Tretten in Flames, isn't there? So Tretton is a small town really, with a river on one side and a mountain on the other, and it was there was fighting there for a sort of couple of days during the Norwegian campaign between the British and the Germans, and there were some Norwegians involved, I think, on the flank as well. So basically, he's been designing that map, and I have to say, I think it looks absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it does. It does look really,
a lot of fun,
good.
very interesting. So we're going to design a couple of scenarios on it that we don't have the river, so we just in order to give have enough room, we just kind of thought, well, look, you can't go into the river, can you? So that's like the edge of the map, if you like.
Yeah.
So for simplicity's sake, we kind of missed that out, so they could develop the town and the hill. To have both of those features side by side along the length of a board is quite difficult.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to butt up a river board on the long edge of it as well.
You could easily do that, yeah. Especially as some of the river boards have a very narrow edge on one side.
Right.
So it would work. This particular one is actually, because it's got a hill on one side, matches the double hill ones from the Forgotten War map boards. Yeah, exactly. It matches one of those.
So Tom's doing a brilliant job. And what Tom is really good at as well is not only just coming up with a map that looks nice, but he thinks about the playability of the map as well, and he thinks about what's going on and if there's an issue with a particular line of sights, which is it's the sign of a good map maker, isn't it? Because I mean, I would say that I would just kind of throw stuff down, make it look pretty, and then suddenly, like, 2 scenarios in, we realise actually every scenario becomes all about this crossroads and this X. And Tom definitely put some thought into making sure that doesn't happen. So
he likes a little bit of individual colour as well, doesn't he? So he's put a quarry into onto our map, which is I think just a little kind of shading within no real significance, but there's a couple of buildings, like administrative buildings around it, and there's a little mountain road goes to a place where clearly there wouldn't normally be a community. So it's it's genius.
Exactly,
Yeah, really good.
And in a way, we haven't got enough personality everywhere in maps. We don't say this is the quarry, this is for the 80 or so maps.
Yes, because they're I suppose that's the nature of the geomorphic maps, isn't it? As soon as you get the historical ones, it's called the Notre Dame's church or something. It's good.
So we've got the marketplace, haven't we? There's the marketplace, which is on one of the boards. And we've obviously got the airfields, the crazily scaled airfields. But we need more things, more things. That's why I want more names. We'll come up with a Patreon giveaway, by the way, at the end of this as well. So we'll ask for some I don't know, some thoughts maybe on naming particular aspects of a board that comes to mind. I don't know. So maybe that's something like that. But we'll do that at the end. We'll move on now to talk about based on the map, and then we'll have some scenarios. So there's some interest, I think, in some unique space of scenarios, and I don't mean in terms of mechanics of the actual scenario or in terms of the game itself, but more around the scenario and the digital delivery of a scenario card. So my first idea around creating something unique is to have a pack that self-balances itself, or maybe scenarios that self-balance themselves. So if you think about every time you download a scenario, the scenario could check the balance of its own record and self-modify itself, so that when you play a scenario, unless you are the very first few people to play, and there's even workarounds for that, which I can talk about in a second, but the idea would be that it would give you a balanced version. Now, obviously, if we think about it as a swingometer, you kind of keep going one way and then you kind of tick the other way, and you might end up somewhere here. And obviously, you can't ever get it spot on, but maybe you can. But the idea is, anyway, that if you give it enough fine control of a scenario based on the feedback of balance play. Now that requires at least one extra thing, which is it requires that the knowledge of the scenario that you've played, which version have you played? Because if you download the scenario and then you don't play it for 3 months, and then you play the one you downloaded 3 months ago, you actually might make the scenario worse rather than better when you put your result in, because it's based on the wrong information. So that's the first kind of challenge. And the second challenge is, well, what do you do about the first play-ins of a scenario? Because obviously, there's no thing. So I have two ideas about that, and I'd welcome people's thoughts on this. But my first thought is, well, whether you have a field on, for example, the scenario archive that lets people assess the balance just by looking at the card rather than actually playing it. So this would mean people download it and they have an ability for any scenario, arguably, rather than saying, this is what the balance because of the recorded plays that's happened. You could actually say, well, this is my perception of the balance. Now, perception can be based on, 1,000 planes that you may not have logged, but this is perception. Or perception could be, I'm a brilliant scenario reader and I can see this is unbalanced in favour of the Japanese, or whatever it might be. So we could add an extra field onto the archive that basically gives someone almost like a barometer of how balanced is this scenario, and that could be used as part of the self-balancing mechanism. So that's one thing. Or it could be used in conjunction with the recorded plays to generate what should be a more balanced version of that scenario. And maybe with a QR code on the scenario card, so that if you log in, you can basically, or you just maybe have to type in the version number, and we can record the version number with the balance that was used to basically make sure that you track that. So that's the first type of self-balancing scenario design I've had to think about. You got any thoughts about that?
No. It's an interesting idea, isn't it? Interesting idea.
Do you think it's my gut feeling is it's perhaps just a novelty that wouldn't take off and wouldn't I wouldn't get the traction for if we got scenarios that had 300 plays, then maybe that's fair. And it's maybe a bit like Indy's first comment was, well, good news because we were just about running out of scenarios. Clearly no one's running out of scenarios, so there's that. But I could think, if for example ASL is still around in 20-25 years time, and for example we are all just downloading scenarios by then because it's just not cool to print stuff anymore. Maybe there's that type of a movement. Could we be thinking that, for example, downloading anything that isn't a balanced scenario as of with the data available and that kind of stuff and errated and etc. always up to date, like a living scenario, that might be like the norm, and we might seem like we were cavemen playing with sheets of paper that don't change and stuff like that. So
I think one of the things is that a lot of scenarios are very unbalanced. In an average pack from a third-party producer, there's probably quite a few scenarios that are perhaps unbalanced, and depending on how hard the publishers work on testing them. Because I think to really test them well, you need to play them quite a lot of times.
Yeah.
And if that's and you very quickly begin to see that there are people call them dogs, don't they? The scenarios that aren't very good because they're unbalanced, and even sort of scenarios. Actually, the one I'm playing Alex, the pastor from Wales guy, a hell of a patrol leader tomorrow, and that scenario is like 30-20. That's quite a significant advantage to one side, isn't it, from the other? So, and that's an MMP scenario, so no doubt it was extensively playtested. It occurred to me that if the reality is, because some people with your idea could say, well, it should be balanced when you publish it. You don't need to have it self-balanced. It should be published when it should be balanced when you publish it. And that seems like a reasonable kind of reaction to that. But a lot of scenarios aren't. And a system like this that balances them over a period of time continually.
Yeah.
And perhaps even with changes in the way that we play the game as a community.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, you could I think we talk about what happens if we change the OBA rules and we include, for example, the Plaver rules by default for every, you kind of self-errata them all the way back. Then in theory that's changed the balance of all the scenarios. And something like this would kind of factor that in. Suddenly if you decide, okay, well actually Bocage is a +3 rather than a +2 TEM or whatever it might be, is the change that you might add. Well, okay, all these scenarios that have self-balancing mechanisms will gradually become balanced again.
Yeah.
So
I think it'd be very interesting to see it work. What I'd like to see though is if we do it, well, I think we're going to have a go at doing this, aren't we? Is that we get enough playing so we see the system functioning. Right. That would be the challenge in a way, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. So then the next thing along the lines, either in this pack or maybe as a separate pack, I'm not quite sure yet what we'll do, depending on what we get in terms of scenarios, but is going to be a scenario that is unique to every player. So in this instance, what we're talking about is, imagine purchasing a pack and we basically get the same scenario as you and I, in our pack, but they are ever so slightly different. So, for example, it might mean, one extra light machine gun, or the SAN number might be slightly different, but everybody has a provably unique version of that scenario. Now, this isn't necessarily to help the community. This is not necessarily. It's just more of an interesting thing we could do, because we obviously we can hash the user ID and kind of create some kind of set of parameters for a scenario, and then dynamically print the scenario or have it downloadable at the time of when people do that. And that's more of a just something interesting. It could be a bit of a novelty, and then we have 5,000 different versions of the same scenario, but it's all effectively the same scenario but slightly different and slightly tweaked. And there's maybe some novelty value in, okay, well, you got the one with the King Tiger, but you've actually got the 6+1 leader, and I've got the 8-1 leader, and I've got the whatever, I don't know, the Panther. We could do kind of extremes, like that. It could even be victory conditions change, then you get into, is it the same scenario? How many times do we have to change something before it becomes something completely different? And then the extension of that idea is then having scenarios that are different for everybody at the same time, but it changes every day. So today's, you've got the 9-2 and you've got to take 4 buildings. Tomorrow it's the 9-1 and you've only got to take 3 buildings. And every time you download the scenario, everybody gets the same scenario, but it's different each day. And again, you can combine each of those. You can combine the self-balancing aspect of that. You can combine the uniqueness per player, and you can combine the uniqueness per day as well into different sets of scenarios.
So people are buying, with all of those, they're buying an electronic resource. They're not buying a piece of paper, a piece of cardboard that comes through the post. Yeah. That's
right. Yeah, exactly. Now, obviously, if you want to print them all out, you of course you can. You can put them in a folder.
Yeah.
There's no thing. And we've obviously got a question about whether we do, we actually print this board as well that we're going to do, or we'll just create a Vasl version. It would be quite fun to think if we could do a printable board, and maybe each card has a QR code that says, okay, lets you download the version for you, rather than for the the downloadable one you have. I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of kind of questions that we could kind of come up with there, but it's just a case of there is still quite a lot of space, I think, in terms of innovation for ASL scenarios and wargaming in general. I mean, there's no reason why every system couldn't do something similar. So that's my thoughts. We are working on some scenarios as we speak. I guess we're going to put the call out as well for people if they have scenario designs in any shape or form. Ideally closer to the balance point than not. But if you've never published a scenario before, if you'd like to get me involved in something like this, get in touch, leave us a comment either on YouTube or get us in touch on email, aslscenarioarchive@gmail.com, or dave.ramsey@gmail.com, or you, Martin, as well, if you're around. And if you want to be a part of it, then feel free, and we'll I think we'll as always, we'll try and make sure that the patrons get this product for free. That's one of the benefits of being a patron. So thank you to all our patrons for all your support so far, and we'll carry on to do bits and pieces for you guys as well. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about a product that might try to be a little bit unique, and we might try and push the bounds a little bit of our current technology.
Excellent.
That's it. You're speechless. Speechless. Okay, all right. Let's move on. Okay, so let's take a look at our scenario that we played from the Hazmo pack, Hazmo pack number 3. And let's take a look. So, Martin, what do you remember about this scenario? We played it a few months ago.
Do you know, I had no idea until I just opened it which scenario it is, but it's quite distinct, very clear in my mind now.
Right.
I'm starting out as the Germans in this factory. Well, actually, so it's the railroad, isn't it? A railway station, but I think it is a factory. Adjacent to... no, you are starting off in the... You're the Germans. But my Russians have to set up adjacent to you, potentially facing, point blank fire and all that kind of stuff. Right. And I've got quite a big force coming on, which is nice.
Exactly. I have a smaller force coming on, which we're going to mess up. We're not going to see, but we're going to. We've got the log file, but some of my counters you won't necessarily see. So apologies for that. But we're going to go through well, in fact, I'll put on the screen right now the kind of the false makeup of both sides, so you can kind of see what's going on. Effectively, though, we are trying to take I'm trying to hold on to the railway station. You're trying to take the railway station.
Yeah.
This is about as bloody and as brutal as you can make a Stalingrad, isn't it? Really, in game form.
Yeah, fair. That's fair.
It's pretty tough. Right. Let's get these red circles off for us. So you go first, and I mean it's basically a case of you're going to run on. You're going to do as much damage as you can, and we'll see. Now you could only bring on a certain number of counters, couldn't you, per turn? That was the
yes, that's right. Yeah,
So you bring on a certain number of counters and have a bunch left over. And your first thing you do, is opportunity fire everything, which was really surprising.
Brave.
Yeah, I thought it was really surprising because it gives me a real chance to survive.
Your defensive fire,
yeah,
definitely,
exactly. So straight away, it's a good start for the German defenders, who are, I think, all fanatic inside this building. The problem is that you will have 8 morales in most of these. You'll be 9 morale inside there, and obviously if there's commissars floating around or -1 leaders, you're going to get to the 10. A bunch of damage already happens from my final fire.
Defensive fire,
which is all pretty good. But you do get a foothold in the southeast corner.
That's right.
We had a lot of problems with trying to figure out if these factories were gutted or not, were we? Because
I
don't think the rules are very clear in Festung Budapest. In Battle of the Guards. But anyway, some pins and some breaks, but nothing crazy. You managed to rally the disrupted, broken guys, and basically just kick me out. I mean, as if I'm not there. It was absolutely brutal. And at this point, the Germans trying to get back into this railway station across the embankments. Now, here's where we can't see my reinforcements coming on. So, I mean, this is as good as it's going to get for this replay. I'm afraid it's not great, but they may as well not have been there. These reinforcements, they all got broken anyway. You can see that obviously you can't see my how many there are, but there's a fair number of counters underneath those CX counters. But you just bring on a whole heap more guys, and just knock me out of this, knock me out of the station straight away. And you're concealed inside the station. And I mean there's a little bit of defensive fire from the invisible guys that we can't see, but effectively it's hopeless for the Germans. They're completely knocked out of it.
I remember being a little bit intimidated by your force, but they all broke.
Yeah, no, exactly.
These things happen. You can see them, the DM counters appearing and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I felt good having so much of my force able to get into the building and effectively become the defender.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what's supposed to happen. I think the Hazmo give you a little guide, don't they? And they basically say, you're not going to hold the station. You've got to just kind of figure out, okay, can you get stuff back?
Yeah. And then I have a kind of a regimental reunion party with all the guys in the station.
Exactly.
Packed in together. Yeah.
But yeah, I threw the towel in at this point. Now I will say that we did bring up the dice rolls, and I had good dice. I had 6.76 as my average dice, but my firing was 7.22. You had 6.07 with a 5.7 IFT average, which was incredible. But I mean, it was.
We talked about dice last time, didn't we? And the thing is, even the Vasl dice, there's no way that I'm shaking that wrong, or I'm throwing them wrong, or there's something wrong with my dice tower. I'm rolling the same programmed dice that you are, and I roll lower than you.
It's absolutely true. But no worries. I threw the towel in there. I do want to play more Hazmo
Yeah.
Hazmo scenarios. We found them all good, all interesting. We played one from each pack now, I think, or maybe two or three actually from the second one. So yeah, we'll get back to that pack as well. Like I said, we're going to do one from the director's pack, and then we'll work on our way through some more of the Hazmo ones. We're also doing a little bit more play testing. We're doing a bit of play testing for the Bounding Fire guys. So that's something we're on the line for. I guess next is let's listen to Toby talk about some mines.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought I'd share a few quick thoughts on placing mines in ASL this time round. And the first thing that comes to mind is that, and I've said this before regarding wire and other things, is that I think in general there's a tendency for ASL players to place their fortifications, including mines and wire for that matter, too far forward. And thinking about this, it does occur to me that there's almost a World War I mentality about it. I suppose we've seen so many films, read so many books where you've got two trench lines, no man's land in the middle, and that in the middle is where all the wire is. And I suppose in World War II that would be where all the mines are as well, covered by fire and machine guns. And so as your enemy is approaching, you get hit by the mines. And perhaps that's why lots of people place stuff up front, because they think, oh, well, that's where the enemy is approaching. In ASL, things such as wire, but particularly mines, the great advantage of mines is their hip, is the effect of something has much more power if it occurs later, because what it does is it interrupts the timeline of the attack. And if you interrupt someone's attack early on with a little surprise, oh, they're broken because they hit the mines. They've still got several turns to overcome that, and they can adapt and adapt the pace of their attack to cope with it. But if they hit those mines late on and units start breaking, then they have much less time to react and change. So it's always worth thinking, I think, when you're placing things, including mines, is it's always worth thinking about the end game. Where does the enemy have to get to win? And how far back could you interdict him or give him a little surprise to slow him down? So generally speaking, then, try to place your mines for the end game more. A couple of other little things. One is the nightmare scenario for me is when you're playing the scenario, say I'm defending, I've got mines, but I know that my opponent has got fully tracked AFVs. And the horrible thing that can happen is you've got your lovely, anti-personnel mines laid out in the right place, and his tank wanders in, triggers the mines, they don't do anything, and he's, okay, yeah, keep going, and lays a little trail break. So that can be annoying. And one little trick to avoid that is to place your mines in bog terrain, so woods. I quite like placing mines in woods, actually, and adjacent to marshes and that sort of thing, because these are places that tanks won't commonly grind into, and therefore they will not usually find your carefully placed mines. And if he does want to, if he finds them with the infantry and wants to place trail breaks, well, yeah, you can do it. Have a bog check, mate. And the last thing, my little thought on mines is regarding those large buildings, which have to be at least, I suppose, 2 hexes, whereby you can place the mines in the building hex, and you can have your own troops in that building hex, and they can be skulking in and out from a sort of interior building, a connected building. And as long as you're doing that, moving within the building, you do not trigger the mines that are outside that building, even if they're in the same hex. And that's a lovely thing to do on the final hex, you know, when he's trying to charge into that building right at the end. And maybe he's been cautious because he knows you've got some mines. And that's another thing, is to while you still got some hit mines, you've placed that little seed of doubt in your opponent's mind, which makes him more cautious. And then he's got his careful timeline. Everything's going like clockwork. Suddenly he advances into you, breaks because of the mines, and you're rolling for ambush, and he's already broken. So never forget that you can place mines in buildings that you're defending, multi-hex buildings, and if you're careful about it, you can be skulking in and out, and you're not giving away the fact that those mines are there. That's it.
So excellent from Toby as usual. I am definitely guilty of putting my mines too far forward most of the time. I always feel that they're you want to try and win a scenario early, break the man's morale, rather than let him think he's got a good chance till the last minute, and then he might get lucky in the last bit.
But Toby's right, isn't he? Because what happens, of course, is they find them, because you're going to put them somewhere where they're almost certain to move through, and then they're going to avoid that spot. You perhaps got some broken, the attacker's got a broken squad or two.
Right.
But it's early in the game. You expect the attacker to get a broken squad or two.
Yeah.
And they've got now time to find a different way around that problem, haven't they?
Right.
Whereas at the end, there isn't any time for you to change anything. If your plan is on your last turn to advance into a hex, and you've got to not be broken, and the mines are there, and you break, that's the end of the game, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
really good advice.
Yeah, it is. Now, mines are different from wire, I believe, and trenches, in that if they're hip, you still have the effect as if they're there. But is it trenches and foxholes and wire that you can move around as if it's not there if it's still hip?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Presumably not roadblocks. That seems.
So I think it has to not. You have to not be in line of sight of the enemy.
That's right.
So you can move in and out of trenches without paying the points, so as not to give away where they are.
Is that wire as well? I can't remember if that's wire as well.
I don't know. I think it's definitely it's pillboxes and trenches. I think, and maybe possibly foxholes, but I don't think. I'm not sure wire.
All right. Well, I'll put the answer down there now. So,
all right, that'd be great.
So Future Us knows the answer already. So that's that. All right. You were talking about giving advice out. You wanted to mention
tabletop talks. Yeah. No, I was really ill because I've been trying to do a tabletop talk once every Friday, and I didn't do last Friday because I was just too poorly. And so I'm giving myself until the new year to get back into it. So the first Friday of January, there will be my next tabletop talk.
Brilliant.
And I've got a number of ideas what it might be about. So it's not quite decided yet. Okay. But
yeah, good stuff. You did your last one was it Machine Gun Nests? Was
that the last one?
I don't remember. Yeah, it was one of the more recent ones. Yeah,
it was certainly one of the more recent ones. Yeah. That probably was Machine Gun Nests. Yeah.
Yeah, and we should give a big shout out to all of our interviewees for the Desert Island Scenarios. And if you're interested in being a part of that, give us a shout. And Martin, I'm sure you'll line them up.
I've got a few lined up. Sort of lined up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll get those interviewing. We'll see what else people like. Last thing from us is the Illuminating Rounds tournament. So we should mention who we've got in it so far. And if you are a patron and you'd like to be in it, give us a shout. If you want to sign up for the patron just to get in it, that's absolutely fine. Ideally, we have the middle tier, and if we need to fill out the spaces to get to a nice round number, we'll go down to the lower tiers as well. But at the moment, we've got Tomo, Tom Rapetti, Jim Bishop, Ryan Dukeman, Paul Legg, Mike Grogan, Tim Reed, you and I, Martin, and Dave Moresk. We're playing for a copy of the deluxe scenario from MMP, the deluxe pack, the MMP one, which has I think I don't know how many, it's loads and loads of boards, isn't it? It's maybe it might only, is it 8 or is it more than 8 boards? I can't remember. Maybe a few more than 8 boards. But all the the scenarios. And what we'll do is we will play deluxe only scenarios in that tournament. And Dave Maresca's kindly offered from the Kansas City guys to add another prize to the pool, and so we'll have a scenario pack from him there as well. So
fantastic.
That's that. If you'd like to win a pack from the Scenario Archive, and you are a patron, even if you're not a patron, please feel free to do us a comment on this. But we'll have you naming us a feature on the maps, any map board. Give us a name so we can start to have some colloquial names for different things. The I don't know, the gully by the lake of whatever. I'm not very good at that, but you can come up with a better name for features on map boards 1 to 80.
Okay, so yeah, some people literally go, "Oh, yeah, on board 17, there's a stream." That could be the whatever.
Go on, you're as good as I am.
Yeah, well, at least I it was a clearer explanation. But
We're both terrible. Yeah, you're an English man. You should be able to sail through this creative task.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, the shit stream. Yeah.
So there we go. So let us know. Give us some ideas for board features, and basically by the time, so within about 2 weeks, we will pick a winner from patrons from the comments on the YouTube channel. Just let us know. Pick a board feature and win the chance for a scenario pack from the archive. That's all I've got, Martin. Anything from you?
Nothing from me.
Okay. Well, we're going to get bidding on our scenario from the Director's Pack, the Tournament Director's Pack. So that's our next task. I'm enjoying that. And until then, we'll see you all next time.
Cheerio.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.